everyone, welcome to Woolen Spinning. My name is Rachel. It is Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. I want to welcome you to this place. Thank you so much for being with me. Thank you for being here. To all of you in the live chat today, you guys make it so much better for me to be here, to chat with you directly and to answer questions in real time. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend it with me. It is hot here. We kind of had a cold snap over the weekend and it was chilly and we were in sweatshirts and jackets and whatnot and it was rainy, and now we're back up to 26, 27 degrees, feels like 30. So go figure. I am located in the southwestern part of the province of British Columbia here in Canada. I'm just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. Knit City is happening next weekend. So not this coming weekend, 4 days from now, but the weekend after. Rebecca and I will be in the marketplace on Saturday and Sunday. We will be around. I actually will be a fixture, a relatively permanent fixture in the Melly Knits booth on Saturday, just helping out for those who need questions answered around spinning and getting started with their spinning and all of that kind of stuff. So if you want to come and find me at Melly Knits with Melissa and her sister Nicole and Sherry Stewart of Conyagas Textiles, there's a whole bunch of us. Erin's going to be there. Please come and say hello. I'll try and remember to wear my name tag. I always forget. But I should have a Knit City thingy on, and if not, then I'll just be in the booth helping out. And then on Sunday, Rebecca and I are just gonna be hanging out. We're gonna be hanging out with her daughter Naomi as well. She's gonna be around too. So please don't hesitate and don't forget to come and say hello. Do not be a stranger. We want to say hi. It's good to see everybody here in live chat. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being chatty as always. It's already moving faster than I can keep up. Hello everyone. Thank you. Rebecca is flying out on Wednesday the 24th, so I'll be going to the airport and picking her up. We have a lot to do between now and then, so I'm just hoping that we're going to be ready. Fingers crossed. And anybody who is missing out on Knit City because you're not local, I hope that you get lots and lots of time to spend doing something that you love to do, which is probably spinning, but you know, just in case it's something else like gardening, I hope you get a chance to do that. So I am wearing today, I actually pulled this out of the depths of my cupboard because it's not quite, I don't quite need a cardigan and I don't quite need a sweater, but I needed something because I was getting chilly because I was sitting in here working all morning. So this is the number 7 tunic cardigan. It is from a very old vintage copy of Vogue Knitting. It's got to be like circa 2006, 2007, maybe even 2005. It was vintage. And it has all of this color work all the way down. I made it years and years ago. And actually, if you want to have a look at my project page, it is there in the live chat for you. It's the number 7 tunic cardigan. So if you search my Ravelry projects page, you can find it as well by searching Vogue or searching tunic. Yeah, I haven't really worn it that much. And you know, it's funny, I pulled it out and I put it on and I was like, why am I not wearing this stuff? Why do I let it go to the back of my cupboard? Like seriously, you guys. And then I was looking at, what else was I looking at? Oh, I was editing Dion's Color Mania video for September. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to get on it. If you're a member of the Patreon community, you have access to the new Color Mania. And she was talking about going into your closet and identifying like what's in your closet and making stuff based on what's in your closet. And I was like, of course, like I always make decisions off the cuff at the last minute. And I really need to be more intentional about going into my closet and being like, no, like what do I have? What do I need? What are gaps that I have? Anyhow, I really need to be more intentional. It's because I get caught up in the moment and I'm like, I want to make this thing, and then I make the thing and then I don't have anything to wear it with. Tell me I'm not the only one. All right, we have a lot going on in the community right now, so I thought what we would do is housekeeping first, and then you guys, it'll be out of the way, and any questions that you guys have, you can throw it in chat afterwards. So I will see you on the other side. There are some changes coming to the Woolen Spinning community in September. We are super excited to start sharing them with you. Please ask lots of questions for clarity and let me know how I can help you navigate it all. Ketchup and Pickles goes out on the 1st of the month each month. They contain all the links and announcements that you need to navigate content and events. Be sure to grab this post when you see it in your email inbox. We're at a really exciting time with the Wool Circle because our Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs is starting the final part of our 2-year study. We will be looking at novelty and art yarns from now until Christmas. Please join Rebecca on the Wool Circle. Look for the free trial. The teaching content that is published each month by myself, Rachel, will be replaced by something new come September. I am so pleased to announce that Dion Carter will be joining our team to explore all things related to color. Her content will be available at all levels of Patreon support from the Spinning Circle and up. All tiers that you see active on Patreon at this time include her new show, Color Mania. Rebecca and I are so excited to welcome Dion to the team, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Spinning Staples and Queries are dedicated Zoom groups with Rebecca and myself, Rachel, to answer questions, navigate the book study, and discuss in-depth hand spinning concepts. Access a dedicated community of spinners who are exploring their craft and inspiring one another face-to-face over Zoom. Our community groups meet informally throughout the week. Look for the Zoom link in Slack at the time of the meeting. These calls are an opportunity to ask questions, learn about Slack and Patreon, and get help navigating content. The post with meeting link goes live the night before on Patreon. I sometimes wonder so Spindle Spun season has sort of ended up taking a bit of a backseat this summer. And I know there were people that were doing it, and I know there were people that were participating and whatnot, which is awesome. But it kind of got lost in the fray of like Tour de Fleece Femme, the changes coming in September, my busy schedule, all the changes that we've sort of made over the course of the summer, and then settling into a new routine this month. So for those who are participating in Spindle Spun Summer, I am very sorry that we kind of ran off the cliff with that and sort of, lost the way a little bit with it, because it's always a really fun event that we do every summer. And Spindle Spun season. Am I saying Spindle Spun Summer or Spindle Spun season? I mean Spindle Spun season. Anyhow, I know there's a few of you that have been really dedicated and have really made quite a lot and really have been spindling all the way along. Corolla has been doing a ton. Christine's been doing a ton. Lisa's been spindling up a storm. Stephanie's been doing a bunch. Eveline's been doing a bunch. Pauline, there's a whole bunch of you. I see you. I love that you're doing so much. And hopefully next show I can go back and do a little bit of a, kind of a Spindle Spun season wrap up kind of thing where we do a bit of Rebecca did a whole bunch. She said she had a Spindle Spun in July. I haven't done community participation for the last couple months, and it's honestly just because there's been so much to cover on the show. We've also had a couple of really great questions that we've addressed on the show that have taken a lot longer. So long story short, hopefully next show, my goal, my plan is to have a little bit of an ode to Spindle Spun season. So if you haven't posted photos in the Slack channel under #spindles, or you haven't posted in the Ravelry group under Spindle Spun season for 2025, go ahead and do that over the next couple of weeks. We have a 5th Tuesday in September this month, so there will be a Tuesday, not next week, but the week after. There will be a Tuesday where there'll be no stream. There'll be no Wool Circle, no live stream, and it's just because September this year had 5 Tuesdays. I'm going to take advantage of it. Rebecca will still be here with Naomi. The kids have a day off that day. It's Truth and Reconciliation. It's a statutory holiday, and so we're going to be doing some fun stuff together. And then the following Tuesday, we'll be back, and I'll hopefully have a bit of a montage for Spindle Spun season for you guys to sort of show what everybody did, because there are quite a few people who've done a lot. So Rebecca was mentioning that next Tuesday on the Wool Circle is Super Coils, which is super exciting. That's one of my absolute most favorite textured yarns in the whole wide world. And I made years ago for one of the Spinning Pearls teaching content videos, I made a super coiled necklace. But one of the things that I found that I learned afterwards is it's not quite heavy enough. So if I were to go back and do that, I would actually super coil around, like I would do the super coil, but then I would thread something heavier through, like maybe even like an actual like necklace that would just weight it down and help it to hang properly, or maybe super coil around something like that. I'm not sure. It needed more weight, so and more ability to move. So yeah, super coils. I love them. Anyways, that's what Rebecca's talking about next time. Have a look at anywhere that you collect your audio podcasts, because Wool and Spinning Radio for this month is out. We've had some awesome discussions sparked as a result of this episode. Rebecca was trying to sow dissent between the three of us. It was really quite funny. It was hard not to just burst out laughing. Using the vernacular art yarns versus textured yarns versus novelty yarns. How do we talk about these yarns? What is meaningful? What terms do we use? I think she summed it up really nicely in the episode, and we had some great chat under #podcast chat in the Slack channel. So go back and read some of those comments that were made after the fact. Becca weighed in, and there was a few other people that weighed in that had some really, really thoughtful ideas about this discussion and what we call these yarns that aren't our traditional, consistent, conventional yarns. What do we call all of these other yarns? Because none of these terms really are that great. So it was fun. It was really fun. It was a fun episode. And a couple of people were like, you guys need to do this more often. I'm like, I'm not sure I can. It was hard to keep a straight face. Rebecca mentioned it briefly about super coils next time. So we're into the final, I said it in the housekeeping video, we're into the very final part of our Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs book study. We are now getting into all those novelty yarns, the textured yarns, the art yarns, etc., etc. Rebecca has posted the syllabus for anybody who is participating. That is available in the Ketchup and Pickles housekeeping post for this month. If you are new to our community and you are having difficulty finding things, please take a moment to jump into the onboarding call. Rebecca will help you. You'll get to meet Rebecca, which is awesome. And she'll help you navigate all the things. You can ask your questions and find out where to find things. And she'll just go through, so that you're not missing stuff. The other thing to mention too is if you are a member that's been around for a while and you want to make sure that you know where to find things and what to look for, etc., or you know that things have changed a bit and you're not quite sure where to find it all, jump into an onboarding call. Rebecca would love to have you. A couple of people have already done that, actually more than a couple, and it just means that we're all on the same page and nobody's missing anything. So please don't ever hesitate to do that. All right, without further ado, let's get into the show, and then we'll start talking about all of the things that have been going on over here. All right, we're going to start off with some sampling that I finished for my friend Melissa of Melly Knits over the last week. So let's start off with that. And if anybody has any questions about any of the stuff that I'm covering or talking about, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to shift over to our other screen and other camera. These are the finished yarns here that are showing on the little screen here. And we're going to talk about them, we'll talk about them next. So let me just find what I need to find, and I will see you in a split second. So back in July, the Melissa runs Melly Knits, which is based out of Surrey, British Columbia, which is the next suburb over from where I live, and from Vancouver, British Columbia. And one of the clubs that she has is called the Butt Hair Club. And I think if my memory serves and if I'm correct, and I might be telling porky pie lies, so just bear with me, but I'm pretty sure the Butt Hair Club is the one that's the ultra fine. It's the really, really fine fleeces. And she had this speed date and she asked me if I wanted to do it for her. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And then I completely got off. I did not get it done at all. And, a lot of it was just because of life and some stuff that came up in the summer, and just honestly not having a ton of energy like I used to. I think I'm still recovering from treatment, and I'm still getting all of my energy back. So I had to really, I have to really pace myself now. So with the speed dates, the way that she does them, they're really fun. She gives you 5 brown paper bags in your club for the month, and this was an anniversary, so it was the 1 year. I think it was the 1 year anniversary for the Butt Hair Club, and this particular one, and basically what we've talked about speed dates on the show before because I've done a lot of these samples for Melissa. This one was the Romney one that I did back in the summer for her, and then we talked about all the knitted swatches last show. So this one. We started off with a coated merino. Her name was Pepper, and it's from Steitzhof. I hope I'm saying that right. Steitzhof in Montana. 21.4 microns, and they also gave a comfort factor, which I've never seen before, which is kind of neat. It was 96.2% comfort factor, which is kind of cool. I've not seen that given before. So meet Pepper. This gorgeous gal is ready to bring a lot of softness and a little spice to each date. Who is her ideal match? Come spin and see. So Pepper looked like this to start with. So we'll just go back to the main screen for just a second. This was Pepper's original locks. I mean, they're just incredible. Look at that crimp in there. She's a little bit tawny, a little bit gray, slightly lighter tips, as we would expect with the fine wools, blocky, so very square. The fleece and the locks look very square. My brother's calling. I'll have to call him back. And yeah, just really, really super fine crimp and that blocky fleece and that blocky lock. Very, very soft and very, very clean. And like when you put this against your skin, I mean, it just feels so, so, so soft. So that's what we started with. And the first, when I got the roving, so let's just pretend that this is Pepper. Let's just pretend. What I do when I get these, because they're in the bags, right? And what I do is I divide them up into 3 or 4 nests. This is sampling. I don't do anything really super special. I'm not going to start spinning a bunch of different ways and trying a bunch of different drafting methods and doing a whole bunch of different stuff. I want to see how this little sample is going to spin if I just kind of default spin and I just sort of let the wool become what it wants to become, as long as it's got enough twist and I can ply it, whatever that looks like, 2-ply, 3-ply. I generally sample based on 2 plies generally. I broke the rules with this one, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I just break this up into different bundles, and then I just go through each bundle and I pre-draft them. And honestly, like that's all I do for these samples. So I strip them down by splitting them, and then I pre-draft them. I wind them up into their little nests. I throw them back into their little baggies, because this one, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but with this one, if you look at the bottom 3 skeins, they all pretty much look the same. They're all very, very similar in color. I can tell them apart now that I've spun them and now that I know which one is which, and I've labeled them and kept them separate. But when you haven't like met them yet and you've kind of just played with them, it's really easy to get them all mixed up. So what I ended up doing was I just break everything up, pre-draft everything, and then I stuff it back into each of their individual bags. So Pepper is this skein here, at the bottom. So this is Pepper. So Pepper on her own spun because she's incredibly fine and she's a really low micron count. Soft, soft, soft. I ended up spinning. I just, like I said, I spun totally default. It spun so fine that I knew immediately that I was gonna have to chain ply her as a 3-ply. And I could have spun 3 separate singles to 3 separate bobbins, and I could have wound them all backwards. I could have done all that, but this is a sample. I'm just getting an idea of what this is gonna spin like if I had the whole fleece, or if I bought a massive bat and I was gonna do a sweater spin. This is just sampling. This is just like a little couple of grams to spin and play with. So she spun unbelievably fine. I knew also, because it's a fine wool and it's merino, she's gonna poof like crazy in the washing process. So lots of twist in the singles, lots of twist in the ply. She's gonna poof, poof, poof. And sure enough, that's exactly what she did. So this little skein here, isn't it a beautiful color? Like, this is the true color. It is just beautiful. She has almost like a slightly lavender, almost like a violet purpley kind of undertone. Like when you look at her fleece, when I was looking at it on the bobbin, I was like, huh, is there something on there that's purple? Like, is the bobbin, like what's it? She really has like a slightly lilac, slightly lavender hue to her. Like, it's really interesting. That gray undertone is sort of slightly purple. Really, really beautiful. Anyhow, chain plied her, very, very bouncy. Her bulk is incredible. You can crunch her down and she just pops right back up to life. And the elasticity, I'll show you guys on the big camera. If I hold my left hand steady, I'll hold my right hand steady so that you guys, so that the photo doesn't get in the way. But if I hold it steady, just bounces like beauty. Probably, you know, I don't know what the percentage would be. I'd have to calculate it, but there's definitely something in here that's quite bouncy, quite springy. So this would be something that you would have to take into account if you were to put this on the loom. She is very bouncy and very springy, and she has beautiful blooms. So one of the questions that Esther had asked this week was, do you wash and finish your yarns before you put them on the loom? And my friend Diana Twist and I have had this conversation like umpteen times over the years, because if you don't wash and finish your yarns, and they change in the washing process, it could, in theory, affect your woven fabric negatively. Same with your weaving fabric, or your knitted fabric, sorry. It could affect them negatively. Yarns like this, where you've got a fine wool, they do change quite a lot. They bloom quite significantly, and it can change your set. Because if it blooms that much, that it takes up more physical space, and you want to preserve that loft and that bounce and that spring, you're not going to want to set it too closely together, which may happen if you don't account for that bloom and that sproing that happens in that yarn naturally after it's finished. On the other hand, if you're, I know I've done some stuff with some of my long wool sampling and stuff where I've got a whole bunch of samples that I need to do, and I've spun all the yarn. I know that it's not going to change that much in the washing process. It's not going to completely morph and change set. I have woven on the pin loom, especially. I've done woven samples and then washed them and finished them after the fact, and they haven't really changed, and it hasn't really been a factor. So take into account the type of wool that you're working with, and also take into account the fact that you're probably going to have to sample a little bit and play around. I don't think that in history, if we really delve deep and we go back really far, I suspect that they probably didn't finish all of their yarns and wash them and finish them, because water would have been a premium, soap would have been a premium. I just have a sneaking suspicion that they didn't. So weaving with a yarn like this that hasn't been washed and finished, I would be leery, because it's going to poof up and it may change the set. But for something like a long wool that's not going to change a lot, I've had really good success with not finishing my wool at all and just doing the woven sample. So that's Pepper. Dion, I hope that answers your question. So I started off with Pepper. So then from there, I spun Pepper and, Pepper and Precious. So Precious is the one right here, right straight down from where I am right now. And Precious is a 50-50, so it's combined 50% merino, 50% of the other wool. Dorset, and this is from Shepherd's Haven here in British Columbia. This yarn bounces like crazy. This is a yarn that I would not want to knit or spin before I finished it. It's got a crazy bounce to it. It's of all of these 4 blends, because these are the 4 blends here in this photo. Of these 4, this is the most, the least fine. It's spun the least fine. I still chain plied it. I still did a 3-ply because it's still spun extremely fine, but not as fine as Pepper on her own or any of these other ones. This one has the most bounce and spring. It feels the most downy, which makes sense because of the Dorset. Oh, that's actually a really good point, Rebecca. Thank you for mentioning that. She says historically, they'd have fulled the fabrics. And of course they would have specialized. So they just know from experience what to do and how to finish the yarns. I think that's a really good point. But yes, they were fulling fabrics in a different, in different ways. They were specialized in what they were doing. I think that's actually a really good point. Yeah, so this one was the most sort of, I don't want to say coarse. It's so unbelievably fine. It is not coarse, but in comparison to the other blends, these 4 blends, this one was the most it just didn't spin quite as fine. It's definitely a slightly higher micron count by adding that Dorset. It's my favorite besides the alpaca, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's my favorite because it would make an incredible sweater yarn. Incredible. The next one was pepper mixed with cinnamon. Again, 50-50. This is the next one over. So this slightly lighter colored one than the Dorset. This one over here. And no, that's not true. The Dorset is that one, and this one here is the Shetland. I had them mixed up. I'm so sorry, you guys. So that one there is the Dorset. This one here is the coated Shetland. This came from Range Road Acres in Alberta. This one was really interesting. So this is this one down here. If it's possible, this one's even softer than Pepper. So this one actually came out even softer, and it feels even softer. And I'm not sure exactly why that's the case. It just has a silkiness to it that Pepper on her own doesn't have. And what I was hoping to show you by coming back to this view is, if you can see from my lights on either side of me, she has quite the sheen as a result. I don't know if I can get the camera to focus there, and you can see that sheen compared to, let me see if I can keep the focus on the yarn. See how Precious doesn't have that same, because of the down, it doesn't reflect the light in the same way, and it doesn't have that same sheen. Whereas this one, because of the sheen from the Shetland, it has a real shine, and Precious is completely matte. Super interesting. And then if I show you Pepper on her own, she's kind of somewhere in between. She's not totally matte, but she's not totally sheen. She's got kind of a somewhere in between. So if you put these 3 in like a gradient of shine, this is the most matte over here. This is medium right here, and this one is the most shiny. But look at that shine from just adding that Shetland. Isn't that incredible? So that is really cool and very, very, very soft. Her locks looked like this. Really interesting. Just like we would expect with a primitive or pointy. This is not double coated, not a double coated, dual coated fleece. This is a single coat Shetland. This is a coat, just to confuse things and make all the terminology really confusing. This particular Shetland is only is a single coated coat Shetland, but then the Shepherd also coated it, so it's a coated single coat Shetland. But beautiful, beautiful crimp, as you can see, and you can see that sheen when I show you the lock. So that is cinnamon, and that yarn is beautiful. That yarn would be incredible for a shawl. I never showed you the blocky downy lock. This is the blocky downy lock of the down, just exactly what we would expect. Little pointy tip, blocky at the base, and lots of crimp, but not as much as the merino. And then This one was really cool. So if we look at this screen here, this is the dark gray. So it's the third one over there, and it's a little bit out of focus in that photo. So it's the second one down here. This one was neat because Pepper herself is kind of that gray color, that really light tawny gray. And this one was a 50-50 with Farah, who was a coated Romney from Nighthawk Ranch. So Farah was a very dark gray Romney, and when they were combined, it created this dark gray. This spun like a long wool. It spun incredibly fine, like incredibly fine. I had to actually consciously reach into the fiber supply to pull more fibers because it was spinning finer and finer and finer. It chain plied really well, and usually a long wool doesn't like to bend. That's why they make bouclés so beautifully. They don't like to bend, but I think because of the 50% merino in there, it allowed it to happen. And it's quite bouncy and stretchy as well. I was quite surprised. And it's got, again, even more sheen. The twist angle relaxed the most in the washing process. So in the washing process, this twist angle was quite a bit tighter, and it relaxed quite a bit in the washing. And it's because the Romney just doesn't want to have that really high twist in it. It just isn't going to take it, and it's not going to keep it. It's going to let it go, and a lot of that twist is going to dissipate in the water. I love this yarn. This would be a fantastic hard wearing outerwear type yarn for a cardigan or a sweater that you're going to wear a lot. It's a little teeny tiny bit tougher than the Dorset. It just feels a little bit stronger, but either of these yarns would be incredible sweater yarns, just incredible. And then the last one, and this was the most surprising, was the alpaca. This is by far the softest of the 5. This one took the most twist. It needed a lot of twist to hold together. It was also the most difficult to spin consistently. I found this one, if you look at the top here, I liked the color the most. I thought it was the most interesting in terms of color because it's that brown alpaca mixed with that light tawny gray of the original Pepper merino. And so it just gives that heathered interest in the finished brown yarn from the merino, but so it sort of softens that sort of Mouret type reddy brown. It has quite the halo. You can see it there. And like I said, it's very, very soft. It's not as bouncy. This would be an awesome weaving yarn. This would make just an incredible length of fabric. The yarn itself I found it difficult. Of the 5 samples, I think I just mentioned, it was the hardest to spin the most consistently. However, it took the twist beautifully. And while a lot of it dissipated in the wash, it's strong. It's again 3-ply, same as the other ones, and the chaining and the loops, no problem. I really, really, really like this yarn. I think you could really play with this and really have a lot of success with it. It is the most drapey of all of them. It's not the most lustrous, but it's very highly lustrous, and you can just have an incredible weaving experience with something like this, a big, but a couple of yards of fabric, and make just an incredible cardigan out of it. Oh, it'd just be awesome. A lightweight sweater that you sew afterwards off the loom. Your imagination is the ticket there. You could do anything with this. It's really beautiful yarn. So that's the speed date. And they all came out really nicely. I really like them. I love the variety of the speed dates. I get a lot out of them. I always learn a lot. And I think because we talk a lot in the community and on the show, in all of the teaching content, we talk a lot about wool characteristics and how they affect the finished yarn. And we always kind of end up going down some rabbit hole about something. And I always find, like, you make one change. You start with this base wool and you make one change, and all of a sudden you have a totally different yarn. And then you take that same wool and you make another change. You have a totally different yarn. You added a non-wool fiber and you have a totally different yarn. If you had done 50-50 wool, 50-50 wool silk, you'd have another yarn. It's just really fun. It's a really neat way of sampling, of learning about fleece. learning how they combine, learning how they spin together. And then of course the next thing to do, and you guys know this because of course this is I already mentioned, this is the Romney. Yeah, this was the Romney speed date. Of course, the next step is knitting a swatch, right? So that'll be the next step with that club with the merino is I'll give the yarn to Melissa to photograph for herself. And then of course I will get it all back from her and I will knit a bunch of swatches. So really super fun. I really enjoy doing those for her. It's time consuming. Don't get me wrong. It is definitely time consuming. It's a project unto itself, but worth it. Totally worth it. I always enjoy making the fabric. And of course, we talk about it on the show and we talk about sampling and we talk about what happens in the finished fabric and why it's so important. So in the end, I ended up with these 5 yarns and this is what they look like sort of up close next to each other. And like you can see, the bottom 3 are quite similar. This was Pepper on her own. And then of course, these are the 4 blends. And that's it for that. Does anybody have any quick questions before we move along? You guys are chatting away. Eveline says, I love seeing your speed dates and it was fun to put my own together with the Icelandic over the summer. It was a really fun project. I love that you're doing it on your own now too. That is so important that we take this and take these ideas and take this learning and then we add it to our own stuff. It's all very fine and well for us to sit here and talk about other people's stuff and other people's blends, but what do you have access to in your local, I want to say fiber shed, but basically in your local, like accessible to you locally, so that you can make these yourself and learn about the wool that you have access to. I think that's awesome. Yeah, speed dates are such a great way to play with fleece if you're not sure what to do with it. Exactly. That's such a good point, Rebecca, 100%. All right, I have quite a big skeined project to share with you that I've been working on for a long time, and it's nice to be able to finally share with you guys the finished yarn. So let's do that next. So I cannot believe it, but this yarn is done. This is my CVM that I combined with 20% Muga silk. You can't even see the Muga in there. I have some better yarn shots in just a moment, but this ended up being roughly 600 yards. It's somewhere between 500 and 600 yards of 3-ply. I chain plied it off of 1 bobbin. CVM from West Coast Color here in British Columbia. Lynn is located just outside of Tappan, British Columbia. And 20% Muga silk from Sanjo Silk here in Vancouver. And Sanjo Silk is located on Granville Island, which is in downtown Vancouver. So if you're ever visiting Vancouver, definitely make sure that you go to Sanjo Silk. It's a beautiful little store. And you need to go to Granville Island anyways, because it's like #1 tourist destination. Just don't go after about 2 p.m. in the afternoon because it's crazy busy and you can't get parking. So this was kind of an experiment and a bit of a labor of love because I had this fleece sitting in my stash for a really super long time. And I think unfortunately what happened was it actually got damaged because when I went to start processing all of this and I started to do all my little samples and I started to do all of the little things with it, a whole bunch of the fleece was actually quite badly damaged. And even if I had like really ripped the locks apart, they were really compacted and compressed. Oh, most of them were felted together and you couldn't even tell like what was what. But I was able to salvage some of it, and this was what the locks looked like originally from the actual fleece itself. They had a really, really light bleach tip, fine wool, very blocky. The crimp is difficult to see, but they have good bulk and really nice feel to them. So I went through my bag and I basically fished out all of the fleece and all of the locks that I could salvage. I carded some of them up. I talked about this on the show quite a while ago. I carded a bunch of them up, spun them long draw, spun them continuous backward. I did a whole bunch of stuff with them. And from there, I sort of found the way that I liked to spin it and the way that I liked to sort of work with this. And in the end, I sort of spun it in a relatively default fashion because it wanted to spin so unbelievably fine that I sort of found myself needing to spin like just sort of, you know, needing to really pay attention to how thickly I was spinning, because otherwise it was going to get thinner and thinner and thinner. And then if I didn't pay attention, it was just going to be too fine and too thin. So in the end, what I ended up doing was just spinning all the little nests that I had, and combining them all onto one massive bobbin. And I ended up filling one of my Majacraft bobbins, which are quite large. They take quite a bit of fiber. I think the most that I have filled one of those is about 6 ounces. I think I've been able to put on, and this bobbin was pretty full. This isn't 4 ounces of yarn, it's about 100 grams. But that was how much I was able to get out of the fleece in the end, and it's about 500 yards. I should really take a proper grist number and actually, like, you know, do the thing properly. But anyways, this is the finished yarn. I'm really happy with it. It is chain plied. Like I said, it's 3-ply. I didn't want to fart around with trying to measure singles and trying to, like, you know, get them equally distributed between weaving bobbins and so on and so forth. Like, it's just, sometimes it's just too much to do some of that. And the yarn itself, if I pull out of the skein for just a minute and I share with you guys on the bigger camera, you can see from this photo actually how even it is. But that was something that I was really, really proud of, was just how evenly spun it is from the carded prep. And I did smooth it as I spun. I did smooth for more of a slightly worsted kind of feel. A little slightly denser. There is a little tiny bit of VM left in it. I've got a bramble here. But overall, it's actually pretty clean. It's actually pretty good. And it has a beautiful sheen because of all of that muga. It's incredible. Like, you can't even really, you know, there's something in here. Like, you know, it's not 100% wool, but it's really hard to be like, oh yeah, that's blah, blah, blah. I think to somebody who's trying to guess, they would maybe say alpaca, maybe, because it's so incredibly soft. But it's not as soft as like a 50-50 alpaca wool would be. So, and it has a sheen, but it's not like over the top, which is typical of Muga silk. Muga doesn't have that same degree of shine that, like, say Bombix has, or Mulberry. Same thing, but two different ways of describing Bombix or Muga silk. I'm just going to put the tag on because what I've realized is in my stash, beware you guys if this ever happens to you. In my stash, I have some yarns that I spun probably 7 to 10 years ago, and they're not labeled. And that was really, I've been going through my stuff and packing things up and deciding what projects I'm going to take with me to my mom's and so on and so forth when we move there in October. And yeah, I might have a different background, probably not the first show in October, but the second show I'll definitely be in a different location. And as I've been cleaning out, I've realized there's a whole bunch of yarns that either lost their labels or they weren't ever labeled, which is really like, why, Rach? Why didn't you put a label on? It takes 2 seconds. So, fail. Anyways, that's finished. And I'm really happy with it. Oh, Dion's in the boat that I was trying to prevent with this spin. So I was trying to prevent this, and Dion's in it. She has to measure her singles to finish her last 3-ply Romney. I don't know. It's funny. Like, that's one of those things that I just hate doing. I don't know why. I just hate it. If I don't do it at the beginning, I'm not going to do it. I've done it a few times where I've measured singles after the fact, and I regret it every single time. I don't know how to get over that. I know that it's like a mental block. I know that, and I just have to, like, get over it. But yeah, I don't know what it is. Yeah. Labels. That's right, Sadie, because we'll always remember, right? Like, we will not remember. You would think that we would, but we won't. Like, I did this speed date for Melissa in the summer, and you'd think I'd remember it was Romney. I still have to be like, hey, what was this one? Like, seriously? And she gave me this because it was a weird and wonderful. It was a weirdo that her and I were discussing, and she was like, oh, take a bit home to spin. Can I remember what it was? No. Did we label it? No. It was something that we were talking about in the wool room, and then now I can't even remember. So I have to ask her. I do, sitting right here, have my little CVM lock from that last yarn sitting right here. So this is what the lock looked like. It's kind of nice sometimes not to just see it in photos, but to see it actually like, you know, in real life, like moving it around. Very blocky at the cut end. Light tips, very difficult to see where the tips are. You can see how the fleece would just get completely mangled. Not a lot of crimp visible. I think it's just so fine. It almost has a three-dimensional quality to it. Like it's almost like the crimp isn't particularly organized. I mean, it's CVM, so that would make sense. Yeah, but it's very, very, very soft, very soft. So those will go together and they'll go into my stash until I decide what I'm going to do with them. I have all of these, like I'm starting to amass a lot of these types of skeins where I need to pull them all out. My Long Way Homestead, same thing. I need to pull them all out and do some brainstorming around what I'm going to do with them. All right. Big deep breath. We've got quite a big topic coming up next. So how do we want to do this? Let's talk about this next. And that'll take us really nicely into twills and modified dummy warps and all that kind of stuff. And let me just see if it would make more sense to do it from here. Yes, it would. Okay, so let's do this next. I will meet you on the other side. Okay. Yeah. Rebecca said, I just guess when it comes to like rewinding for 3-ply, put it on 3 bobbins, and when one runs out from the bigger one, then chain ply the rest. I know I'm a little bit more anal retentive than that. I'm not sure I could. I've done that lots over the years, but it kind of got me into trouble with my Corriedale, my brown Corriedale spin from the summer. Yeah, I know. I have to stop overthinking it and just do it. I put my labels in a handy place so I can just grab and label now if I can remember where the handy place is. I know, right? I hear you. Okay. Yeah, you guys should see my little bin that has all my stuff in it. It's quite the mess. Okay. So I finished this yarn and we talked about it on the last show. Let me just get to the place where I can show you the yarn. This was my variegated BFL from Fat Cat Knits from years ago. I bought this pre-pandemic. It was Dame Goodell's Gradient was what it was called. In the live chat a couple of shows ago, we could not figure out where Dame Goodell came from. I had assumed it was like Lord of the Rings or something, but apparently I was wrong. Sam messaged me later and was like, my husband thinks it's something to do with math. I can't remember exactly what she said. And I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty consistent with what went on in chat. I think Eveline figured it out or thought maybe she'd figured it out. Anyways, we don't really know exactly where it came from, but the finished yarn was gorgeous. I loved all the grays in it, which was what drew me to the gradient in the first place. So I finished this while we were in Jasper, Alberta, at the end of August. I chain plied the bigger skein because I'd already done the little one. We talked about it on the show. And got it all chain plied, that big one down there in the bottom right hand corner. And I decided in a kind of a moment of probably insanity, to put it on the loom. So I just realized that I do not have my weaving journal with me and I really, really need it. Shoot. Do you guys want to look at the pretty pictures for a minute and I'll go grab it? Because I have to have it. Maybe I can remember the numbers if I bring it up on Ravelry. Okay. I will try to remember it on Ravelry, and if it's not working, then I'll have to go get my book. I can't believe I left it upstairs. So this was, let's go back. Okay. Let me just get my words here for a minute. Okay, let me go here. Yeah, okay. So I had originally taken the fiber and I had spun it end to end and then I chain plied it, right? So what ended up happening was in this skein, I ended up with these really super long repeats of color. So I ended up with long repeats of purple, long repeats of green, long repeats of the gray, and the dark teal blue that you see in the middle there. And I didn't have a ton of yarn. So this is where I need my book. But basically, Rebecca says, go get it, we'll be fine. Dion's like, go get it. I think I'm going to have to go get it. So basically, I think I had, and Nicole on the Slack channel and the weaving channel yesterday, she was asking about how to like figure this out, but for double weave. And I went through like a whole example with her, and she was like, oh, okay. So basically I had to figure out how much yarn I could allocate to the warp and still have enough yarn left over to allocate for the weft. So for this, and the place that I start, and it's not perfect, it's not an exact science, but the place that I start is with 2/3. So I allocate 2/3 of the yarn to the warp, and then the remainder is weft. The thing with this though is, if you lose a whole bunch of yarn, a whole bunch of your warp to having to tie on and loom waste at the back of the loom, then you're going to end up needing even more yarn for the warp, and that'll leave you with even less yarn for the weft, right? And so you either have to narrow it or you have to shorten it. Like you have to do something to make it so that you have enough yarn. Generally what I would do is narrow it first, figure out what I need, and then if that's still not enough, then shorten what your original length that you had hoped for was going to be. So with this one, what I ended up doing was I took 2/3, and it took a lot of back and forth to figure out, okay, if I allocate this much for the warp, how much do I have left for the weft? And then I had to like tweak that number. Okay, how much do I have for the weft? Still not enough. Okay, I need to shorten it up a little bit, and so on, and back and forth and back and forth. What has been a game changer for me, and before even learning this new technique, but what was a game changer for me previously was using a dummy warp. And that means that all of the loom waste and all of that stuff that you lose at the back of the loom, they're called thrums when you cut them off and you end up with those threads at the back of the loom. Whether you're on a rigid heddle, a table loom, a floor loom, you're always going to end up with a bit of waste at the back of the loom. You just are. And there's varying amounts depending on the size of your loom. The bigger the loom and the bigger the loom from front to back becomes, and the more space there is, generally speaking, the more waste you're going to have. Generally, that's not etched in stone, but generally. So anyhow, my Louette Spring has relatively low waist. My Louette Jane also has relatively low waist. It's sort of more what I would consider similar to more like a rigid heddle. They're not looms that are really super deep. My Leclerc Jack that just went to live with my friend Charlotte, it had quite a bit of loom waist, about 18 inches at the back, sometimes 21 inches at the high end. And it's just a bigger loom. There needs to be more threads that go around the back of the loom to help those sheds to open up still as you get toward the end of the warp. So having a dummy warp where you actually wind a warp separately and put that on at the back, and then you put that on the back apron rod, you spread the warp, you throw it through the rattle, and then you tie on, you cut the back of your actual warp and you tie on individually. And I've shown what that looks like, and I've done that lots, and I've shown it on the podcast. But that's sort of when we talk about a dummy warp, that's what we're talking about. But Dana came to my rescue, and she's like, you don't have to tie all of those individual knots. You can tie it in bundles and in batches. So if you look at this photo here, if you look toward the back of the loom, there's those white threads coming forward. I just used a lark's head knot to loop it around the back of the loom, and I have some video to show you guys later in the show. But I looped those around the back, and then I lark's headed it to the warp itself, and you can see that sort of at the front where the lees sticks are. There's a few things I would do differently next time around doing this particular, but every time you do this, you improve your process, right? I love how Laura Fry, she's a master weaver and an instructor. She teaches on the School of Sweet Georgia if you want to learn more about her. She always says do everything 7 times before you start to change it and start to make a lot of modifications. Because the first few times you're just learning the technique. The second couple of times you're perfecting it. And then the last few times you're figuring out what you want to change and what you want to, and making it your own. And I really like that, because this is one of those situations where I can see based on your loom and your needs and what works for you, you're going to change it up every single time. So based on what I ended up with the yardage for the warp, to optimize the width and the length, and I wanted a nice long fringe because it's fun to show off the colors and show off the spinning. I took a 36-inch long 8/4 cotton thread, and I folded it in half with the lark's head, so that's at the back of the loom there, and I tied it onto my back apron rod with a lark's head, and then I looped it through. I did the opposite. I looped it through a bundle of threads on my cross, and then I did a lark's head at the back of the loom there. So you can see at the top there, you can see it loop through each inch. I did it by inch. So there's 12 all the way across. And because I didn't have tons of ends for this project, I can't remember what it was because I'm on my weaving book. I might have to grab it. You guys are so gracious about, oh no, just get it. And it saves an unbelievable amount of time to do it this way. What was really cool was because the knots from so this is called a modified dummy warp. And what was really cool is because I spread it all across the back apron rod, the 8/4 cotton, when you pull it tight, and I've got video to show you in a few minutes, it stays really tight and it stays snug in the same spot. So with this warp, it was quite short. I'll show you in a second what the stole looks like. But this warp, because it was quite short, and even though it was about 13 inches wide on the loom, I can't remember exactly what it was, might have been 14 or 14 inches wide. Let me check. It was 12 inches wide, so just over 12 inches wide, but relatively wide. Having the 8/4 cotton modified dummy warp, it actually spread my warp for me. And so with this, because it was so short, I didn't use a rattle and I didn't spread my warp. So I kind of skipped that step. So here you can see it's wound on. And then this is it tied onto the front. The warp has been spread with the first couple of inches, about an inch of weaving with a slightly thicker wool. And this is another angle of the modified dummy warp at the back. So you're taking chunks of 12 threads in this particular case, and then this was me threading it. And you can see at the back of the loom there, the reason why I included this photo was because at the back there, you can see that the warp is nicely spread across the back apron. And I didn't, skipping the rattle. Afterwards, I was like, oh, wait a second, I forgot to use a rattle. And I was like, I bet you I didn't think of it because the modified dummy warp was spread on its own and it kind of did it for me. Yeah, Dion, I know that Lisa said that, and I want to talk to Lisa because she said this is modified lashing on. I looked at quite a few sources. They all called it a modified dummy warp. So I wonder if it's just different vernacular in different areas of the world. Because I've seen modified lashing on described as happening at the front of the loom. So I'd be very, very curious, different weaving teachers, I think people have like different phrases for different things in different areas of the world, depending on sort of how they teach it and what they're teaching. So because this is warping, I'm going to continue calling it a modified dummy warp because I don't want to confuse people thinking that lashing on generally happens at the front of the loom. So I don't want people to think that I'm doing it at the front. I want them to know that I'm doing it at the back, that it's during the warping at the back of the loom. Does that make sense? Yeah, because I know I saw that too and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. That's a way more, it almost feels like that's a better phrase, but I worry that people are going to get confused. So yeah, thank you, Dion. Thank you for bringing that up too, because it's good to know what different people are calling different things. So this ended up being, so what I did with this was very, very similar to my last couple of projects that I did. So my Breed Blending Color Study, as well as my Silk Puff stole that I did. What I really wanted to do was have some sort of a twill pattern running in the background of this that would sort of, in the places where you've got green on green or blue on blue or gray on gray, I wanted that to just wash out and not really be visible. And then the places where it's high contrast, you've got purple on green or teal on the teal blue, that beautiful dark teal blue on green. as the weft gets added, that you would have that higher contrast. So what I did was I started playing around with M's and W's. I love M's and W's. It's one of my favorite 4-shaft twill patterns. So you tie up your loom 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 1, just like you would for a 4-shaft twill. But if you notice your tie up here at the top of the loom, at the top of the draft here, this is where your tie up is. This is the threads that are going to go through your individual heddles on your individual shafts. So that thread that's at the very top there where that blue arrow is, that's going through on your 4th shaft. That's your first thread. If you notice, it makes a W and then an M and then a W and then an M. So it's really easy to keep track of your threading. So basically what I did was every time I had a bundle of 14 threads, because that's the repeat, I would just tie them together and throw them off to the side. So if you have a look at this photo here, you can see down there that I've got a bundle of 14 and I loop them all together. And so then I know as I work my way across that that's one section, that's the second section, the third section. And I think I had like 7 or 8, I think was what I ended up with across the whole loom at the end. It wasn't a very big warp, like I said. And then for the treadling, you end up, making, instead of weaving it the way that it was threaded, I wove it as an extended point twill. So 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then back up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So think of it as like a big mountain, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's kind of like this big mountain that you're going up and down. I think of them as like extended V's where they kind of go, you're going down and then you're going down again. Hang on, you're going down and then you're going down again, and then you're going up and then you're going up again. And you can see that there with the red arrows, how you weave that. So for those who this is all brand new and you haven't learned some of this yet, and you're just kind of getting the idea and the feel, that's how you get this particular pattern. Depending on how you weave different patterns, you can take M's and W's and you can weave this and you can just put it in your warp, in your weft. So you can weave M's and W's in your weft and it makes another pattern. Or you can weave it 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1 in perpetuity, and you'll get another pattern. And then you can weave 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is straight draw. You can weave that in perpetuity, and so on and so forth. So there's all different things you can do. So this is what I ended up doing with this particular pattern. And what is so cool about this is you're beginning to understand as we kind of progress through and we do all this different weaving and all this different stuff together. As I build on all these different projects and use all these different examples on the show, you're learning the foundation of the twill circle. So you're learning that as long as you flank your twill with something that sits right next to it, 1, 2, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 4, 1, that you can create anything as long as you stay within that circle. So with the M's and W's, I can create any pattern I want as long as I stay within that circle. And you just keep going around the circle back and forth however many times you want, and you create that 45-degree in the cloth itself as you weave up one way, or you can weave back the other way. You can create right leaning twills, left leaning twills. And basically what the twill circle does is on 4 shafts especially, it gives you a place to start and it gives you sort of a visual understanding of what's happening and what's going on. If you notice, 1, 2 is opposite 3, 4, or 1, 4 is opposite 2, 3. And that just helps to sort of start to get your head around sort of, plain weave and basket weave and some of these other canvas weave. And so I really think of the twill circle as a color wheel, but it's for twill angles. So it arranges it all in different slopes of twill lines around a circle so that you can see how changing the step in your draft gradually moves you in a gentle diagonal to a perfect 45 degrees. And a lot of people have protractors and they actually check it on their fabric. And you can, go up one way and then you can go back down the other way. So up one and then down the other. And they're all perfect 45-degree angles, and it flips you from right leaning to left leaning. And it's a really great way of sort of starting to understand how twill works. So let's look at the final project. So the green of the weft, there's a couple of things I would do differently next time, but the green of the weft ended up being really super long. And you can see that it ended up creating this really high contrast in the middle here. And then where the purple and the green cross, it created this really high contrast here. What was kind of too bad was the transition from the green to the next color was really stark. It happened really quickly, which was kind of too bad, even though I was rewinding my bobbin. So for all of these projects, I've had to wind my weaving bobbin and then rewind it to get back to the first end to preserve the integrity of the colorway in the hand spun yarn. So unfortunately, the first kind of just over 3/4 ended up being really, really, really bright and ended up being like really, really, really green. And I would have broken this up a little bit and had maybe some of it here and then maybe more of it at the end if I had known that it would be so long and would be so bright. But it's just the way that it wove up or spun up, and so therefore that's the way it wove up. Because it spun that way, it wove that way, if that makes sense. But then you can see this is what I was really hoping to create. This right here is like what I had in my head. So you can see that you have that area of high contrast with the purple and the green, but then you also have the high contrast with the purple and the teal. And then again, it's lost in this really super, low contrast gray on gray area on both sides, which kind of frames this in here and frames this over here, which I personally, I really love that. And then at the end, you go back into that dark teal blue. That was the end of my first skein, and it ended with the dark blue, and you get that high contrast again, but then you lose it in the middle, which is kind of cool. And actually, to a certain extent, you do lose it in the purple because they're quite close in value. They were both quite dark, so it creates very, very low contrast, whereas the gray it was higher contrast, and so you could see it in the purple down there, which is kind of cool. This striped quite a lot in the warp. The warp is very, very striped. It's sort of a faux iCat. And you can see that from end to end, it doesn't really change that much. You've got that dark teal going through the middle of the entire thing. Again, I think if I had known that, because of the width that I had to narrow the warp a little bit because I knew that I was going to run out of yarn. So I could only wind a certain width of warp. I think what I maybe would have done was taken some of this green over here and added it to this side instead, or maybe like flipped the warps so that the greens ended up together, and these here, this was the end of the one. I warped half of, I did one warp chain for the first half and one warp chain for the second half, and I think what I would have done is I would have flipped these, like this goes to here and this goes to here, so that the green would have ended up all together and one chunk in the middle, and the blue, because they ended up being quite even, would have ended up on the outsides. Does that make sense? But you don't know until you weave it up, so you have to kind of trust yourself and go with your gut a little bit. And then in terms of the length, the finished length is about 55 inches by about 11 inches. On loom, it was 60 by 11.25. That's what it was. I pulled it up on Ravelry. So it's a little tiny bit shorter than I wanted, but honestly, I'm actually finding that having all this bulk under my jacket doesn't work anyways. So this is actually kind of perfect. It's like actually quite good. And it's soft. I'm surprised. The variegated BFL is actually quite soft. And I really like it. So that turned out really, really well. Color pops, beautiful. Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, the lengthwise columns of changing contrast look really cool. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's very, very similar to what we were able to create in the silk puff. And then also some of the places in my breed blending color study, right, where you get that very subtle 4-point twill in there, you know. And this was even more subtle and even less obvious because it was even more low contrast, right? So this almost kind of looks like a faux plaid almost in some ways. So very, very happy with how this turned out, even though I would change the green a little bit. but that's how we learn and that's how we get better. So really happy with that. I'm also really glad that it's not just, the yarn didn't just go into my stash. I think that's something that I'm really working on, is trying to get this yarn out of my stash and use it and learn from it. That's huge. To finish it, I did the same thing as I did with my other ones. I washed it in gentle wool wash. I used Eucalyptus. I soaked it in not super hot water, but quite like, you know, hot-ish. I just let it soak. I moved it around a little bit. I kind of gently, you know, scooched it around with my fingers. I didn't treat it too badly because I wanted to preserve the fringe. I didn't want the fringe to get wrecked if I started to get really super aggressive with it. So I was quite gentle, but in the water itself, I kind of scooched it around like this in all the areas. And then I threw it into a linen or a lingerie bag, and I spun it in my washing machine. And then from there, I pulled it out, laid it out flat to dry. And once it was completely dry, I gave it a really firm press with my iron. Not on the fringe. With the fringe hanging straight and hanging down, it actually dried quite straight, same as my other two. So I just left it, and it's BFL. So it's poofy and it filled in all the places and it looks cool. I love fringe when it's just left. I love it. I know it doesn't last as long, but I love it. I figure worst case scenario, years down the road, you serge across the bottom and you turn them into pillows or something and get rid of the fringe completely. Like, that's kind of in the back of my mind. Yeah. Okay. Oh, thanks, Rebecca. She said it's a great comparison between the 3 different projects. It's nice to be able to see. So I was so inspired that I decided to pull out a yarn that has been in my stash for a very long time. And I bought this with Rebecca when she was here in 2020, when everything was shutting down. It was the last time we were able to go to Sweet Georgia Yarns before Felicia had to close everything. And I spun this yarn up in 2000 and I think it was 23. I'm pretty sure it was 2023. I didn't spin it right away. I had it for quite a while. 2022. I wasn't that far off. And this was done, it's a BFL silk. It's called Tofino Road Trip. As far as I know, this colorway is still available. I had 8 ounces of it, and this was a seconds from the seconds wall. Something about it wasn't quite right with the colorway that they had originally dyed. And I ended up breaking it up. So because it was 2 braids and I wanted to do a 3-ply, let me just make sure that I'm telling you the truth, because I'm not sure. It's been so long since I spun it that I'm sitting here thinking I did a traditional 3-ply, but I maybe didn't. Yeah, I did. Okay. So basically what I did was I took the 2 braids and I measured them out so that I would have 3 distinct bobbins. So I took roughly 2/3 of each braid, and that was a bobbin. And then I took the last thirds that was left, and that was a bobbin. And then I just spun them. I think I probably stripped them down. I think I probably created some nests and whatnot, but basically each 2/3 ended up being a bobbin. And I remember when I was plying, it was very, very even. Talking about going back to, you know, wanting things to be even and measuring singles for a 3-ply and blah, blah, blah. This, I figured out the bobbins ahead of time, and that's them here. And I rewound them to the first spun end, and I plied them relatively firmly. I was gonna throw this back through my wheel to tighten up the twist, but when I was looking at it and I was giving it a tug test to see if it would be able to withstand loom pressure, no problem. And I part of that's because it's a 3-ply, part of that's because it was tightly twisted in the singles and the ply. Part of it's the strength of the silk that's in there. So all of those factors combined, I knew that the yarn would be fine. So same thing with this. One of the things that I want to work on, now that I've let my Leclerc Jack go, and that was a 4 shaft loom, One of the reasons for getting my Leclerc spring was, and I bought it third hand, and I've had it for quite a long time now. One of the reasons for getting it was because of the 12 shafts. I will never like outgrow that loom. There will always be something new to learn, right? Another structure, you know, something. And so, oh, great question, Dion. I'll come back to that in just a sec. So, because I've done so many 4-shaft projects with all these twill projects that I've been doing with my hand spun recently, I was like, I'm not allowed to do another 4-shaft project. I have to do an 8-shaft. I'm not allowed to do anything else. So I found this really super simple 8-shaft twill pattern, and it's kind of neat because it's just a straight point twill. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Over and over again. And then it's woven what we call trompe as rit, which means that it's woven in the weft the same way that it's threaded. So it's super easy to remember, and it's relatively easy to figure out where you are in the pattern by, again, following the twill circle. The twill circle is bigger because you've got 8 shafts, but you can sort of figure out where you are based on what's going on in the fabric. So this was where I started. And so I figured out the pattern repeat, how wide it needed to be, all that kind of stuff. And I started weaving. So this is it on the loom. And again, you've got those really high contrast areas, and then you've got those really low contrast areas. And what I have figured out, in my humble opinion, for my aesthetic and what I like, I have realized that with this one, you have big chunks of areas where you have really super high contrast. So you've got the purple on blue here, you've got the green on blue in this part, etc., etc. And I think what I have learned and what I really, really like is something more like this, that's a little bit more subtle. I don't know why, but this makes me think of like Victorian wallpaper. I don't know why, it just does. But I really like that the high contrast isn't all over. This particular photo looks like it's the whole thing, but in real life, it's actually much lower contrast than it appears. The middle is quite high contrast, but then the outsides are a little bit lower. It just, from the photo, it looks a bit higher contrast than it actually is. I really like that there's those lots and lots of subtle areas where you lose the pattern and it's just too low contrast and you can't see what's going on, like right below me here down at the bottom and over in the corner there where you've got the light blue on light blue. For whatever reason, I just really like that, and I think it's really beautiful. To hem stitch all of these, I use the weft yarn. So I use the weft yarn. I throw those first 2 picks and then I beat them together. I don't beat the first one. I beat them after I throw the first 2 so that I can get my selvage correct. And I make sure that I save a length that is 4 times the width of the weft, and then I use that to hem stitch with. And I do that at the other end as well. I hope that helps, Dion. But yeah, I use the weft yarn to hem stitch. So this is what it looks like. And then again, this is the modified dummy warp thing again. So, or the modified lashing on, depending on where you are and what you're calling it. So again, I used a lark's head knot around the 1 inch of ends in my cross. I used a lark's head knot, and then I attached it to the back apron rod, and you can see how tight it is at the back there. Like if you have a look there at the back, like I'm tugging on it to show you guys, but like they do not move. It does not move. And so I spread it across. This warp though was wider and it was a finer. So this was set at 13 ends per inch. This one was set at 12 ends per inch. It's amazing what one thread across your entire warp will do in terms of just a slightly finer set. I was quite surprised. I ended up tying on the dummy warp. Hang on, this is out of order. So let me just go back. So here is the warp wound. Aren't those pretty colors? I love these colors. just, oh, whoever came up with this colorway from Sweet Georgia Yarns, it's called Tofino Road Trip. They just nailed it. For anybody who's been to Tofino, into the national park out there, and there's Long Beach, and it's all water and ocean and mountain, everything meets in one spot. They get the most insane weather you've ever seen in your entire life. They just nailed the colors, the color of the sand, the color of the sky, the color of the rock, the water. Like, it's just totally like that. So yeah, again, I went across, I used the same thread 8/4 cotton that I had used for my other one. I just reused it because they're just lark's head knots, so you can just pull them off and pull them out after you're done. And to get the warp out of these loops, I just cut them, because by that point it doesn't matter if you cut your warp. And then you can see them hanging off the back of the loom here. So this is one of those things where you kind of have to figure out your loom and figure out what works for your loom. Because for me, to get enough length at the back of the loom to make it work, to be able to carry up my threads and to get it all working properly, I tied them on and I kind of spread them out across the back apron rod, and I started winding it on because I just didn't have enough space to work. There's not enough depth in my Louette spring. So I started winding on the dummy threads, part of that dummy warp. And then I moved the thread, and I had the first, okay, I don't want to lose you guys, but just bear with me for a second for the weavers out there. When I did this the first time with this warp, I did my cross and my leash sticks at the front of the loom, and that was okay. It worked quite well. But this time I tried it at the back of the loom, and that worked way better, because then afterwards I could spread my warp. So once I had the modified dummy warp threads starting to wind onto my back apron rod, onto my back apron rod, and then onto the back beam, then I just lifted the warp up over the loom and I spread it. And I could have done that with this, but my leash sticks were at the front, and I could have moved them and played around with it, but I didn't need to, like we already talked about. So once it was spread, I wound it on very quickly and very easily, and I started threading. And again, these are the repeats all the way across, and I use just a very simple overhand knot with the little loop so that when I know how many repeats I've done and how many more I have to go. And it also helps me to start slaying my reed in the center, because I just count across repeats. If I have 15 repeats, I know I need to start in the middle of the 8th loop collection of threads, and that'll be the middle of the warp, because I've got 7 and 7, and then the center one, and I'll start in the middle of that, in the middle of my rattle, and that will be in this, it'll all be centered when all is said and done. And then this was me starting to weave. So I lashed it onto the front. With these warps, I have found I used to tie a knot and lash on. See, this is where it gets confusing, right? Lashing on, what are we talking about? So when we lash on from the front of the loom, we're talking about tying a knot in your warp, and you're lashing usually a very lightweight thread or rope, lightweight rope or a heavy duty thread through the knot, and you lash it onto your front apron rod, and then you tighten your warp from there. Because I want the fringe of the finished stoles, I don't mind tying onto the front and preserving that at the front. So I find tying on, I get really nice tension on the edges rather than lashing on. I hope that answers any questions that people had about all of that modified dummy warp stuff, and I can answer any questions in the Slack channel that you guys have, or comment down below. Throw in your 2 cents. Because it's always fun to chat about this stuff some more. So the other project that came off my loom, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because the show's already been going on for a really super long time, and we still have one more thing to talk about after this, so just bear with me here. The last thing that I want to talk about was actually a project that went onto my jack loom and came off my jack loom in less than a month. I didn't share it last episode because it's such a huge project. It is off the loom now, but it was one of those things where I learned a lot. I would do a lot of things differently, and I also was rushing because I needed to get the jack loom out of here. So let's talk about that next. Shoot. Oh, sorry, you guys. Thank you. Ellen, we were talking about you yesterday and wondering how you're doing and what's going on, and hoping that you're doing really well. So thank you for your comment about loving my weaving. So this is from Jennifer Moore's Double Weave book, and it's the Double Weave Log Cabin blanket that's in the book. This is 800 ends of Briggs & Little Sport, which is a 1-ply yarn. And for those of you who know, you know, like it is a challenging yarn to work with. I think this is where sizing would have really come in handy, because for my master weaver, I had a much smaller warp. They weren't as wide. It was on a table loom. I had a lot more control. But on this, the double weave, you're lifting an entire layer of the blanket and then going underneath. So there's just a ton of mistakes and picks, skips to fix. And it's just a monstrosity. It is so huge. So it's 40 inches wide weaving on the loom for a total of 80 inches wide in real life once it's off the loom, and by 92 inches. I have not washed and finished it. I have a lot of mending to do and fixes, like I said. And then to get it off the loom at the end, when I finished weaving it, I had to fringe twist it as it came off the loom, because of course I was going to lose that end edge unless I put like a woven footer in kind of thing, where you've got a woven header at the beginning. I could have put in an end, but honestly, like by then I needed it off the loom and I needed it just something on it done. I was under a lot of pressure with this project because I had to get it off the loom and out, and get the loom out, I mean. So it was rushed. I also don't know, honestly, if I didn't have that timeline, I'm not sure that it would have gotten done. I honestly think that like it would have languished because it was so hard. The reason it was so hard is this. So watch what my hands are doing as I'm weaving, and I muted the video, but you can actually hear, if it wasn't muted, you can actually hear the banging of the loom, because it was so heavy to lift all of the layers of the blanket. But as you could see there just a second ago, I had to reach underneath to separate the warp threads because they kept getting stuck together. And they were creating, like, you know when you felt wool and you get those little like pills? That's what I had to keep pulling off the warp and literally cutting out of the warp. So then I had to be careful I wasn't cutting warp threads. And then they're singles, so then at the edges, especially where the fold is, they kept breaking. So this would have been a great opportunity to size, and I could have sized this warp by, I think Lisa had said, one of her weaving teachers had suggested for sticky warps that she uses laundry starch spray. And her method is to raise each shaft individually, spray it, keep it raised until the sizing has dried, and then you lower it. And for each shaft, drying the sizing before you lower it each time. And of course with superwash, it washes out really easily. With this being a 100% wool yarn, I'm not sure that would have been the case to the same extent, but honestly, I wouldn't have cared. Like 92 inches of weaving with a sticky warp, like, it just made it so much slower, so much slower. Yes, the blanket is beautiful. I'm looking forward to washing and finishing it and getting it like loosened up. It's a little bit stiff right now. Getting it a bit looser and seeing sort of what I can do with it, but it is a massive blanket. I have had this yarn in my stash for about 6 years waiting for this project. And I knew if I didn't do it on this on this loom at this time, I wouldn't have done it because the loom was leaving my house. So tricky. So this is what I wanted to share with you, the actual log cabin itself. It's really pretty. And it basically ended up being, the idea was to make them square, and they are really pretty. I'm not sure I would have chosen the charcoal and the gold again now. At that time, that was my absolute most favorite color combination. I'm not sure I would choose it now, but it is really pretty. And once it's washed and slightly folded, it will be really pretty, but I have a lot of fixes. So I've packed it up. And this is me taking it off the loom. And actually, this was actually quite fast, even though I had to fringe twist 800 ends. I'm actually surprised. It actually went quite quickly. And it just meant that one end of the blanket was done. And I don't have to think about it again. And now I have to do the other end, which was really nice. So that one end is totally done. what I'm going to do, what I did was I put it in a box, and with my fringe twister and all of my scraps and all my thrums, and I'm taking it to my mom's, and I will fix it in November, and while we're living at my mom's, in those quiet evenings when I can just sit on the floor and spread it out when it's chilly, and I can slowly fringe twist and fix it. And hopefully in the early new year I will have a finished blanket to share with you guys. So I'm gonna put this on a back burner, put a pin in this one, and I will hopefully be able to share it with you in the early new year. It'll be done. I do want to have it done because it's meant to go on the bottom of our bed. That was the whole purpose of making this blanket in the first place. And so it would be nice to be able to actually put it on our bed when we move back into the house, right? Like, how cool would that be? All right. Last but not least, we have a question, and I really liked this question, and so I thought that we would address it really quickly before we say goodbye. So this is from Stephanie. No, sorry, this is from Mary. Is mixing different fiber yarns wise for a beginner? I color matched the breed study yarn with a hank of hand spun I already had in my stash, but it's a merino blend. So would this be a ridiculous combination? Thank you, Mary. What a great question. So, I wanted to give you an example of where people have used different yarns and with varying results. Especially with our breed blend and color study. So for those who don't know, our breed blend and color study was this. I shared this earlier in the show. This was my project for breed blend and color study. I wove off this big stole, and mine, I did not combine other fiber types, but just so that you guys know, the breed blend and color study was BFL, Wensleydale, 40% each, so 40-40, and then 20% mohair. So a very interesting blend, and very, a little bit toothy, has a halo, you're spinning a long wool. So this was what Stephanie did with hers. So off the loom, the fabric was lovely in terms of drape, texture, and color, but I wasn't 100% feeling it as a scarf. I thought the bold striping in the warp emphasized the vertical a little bit too much, making it feel too long and too narrow. So I gathered up my courage and I did some cutting and sewing and ended up with a double wrap cowl that I absolutely love. I think the shape really lets the twill drape and the 20/2 silk weft shine. So it will be a great piece for fall, and I'm so grateful for the inspiration and encouragement. I totally agree. Stephanie, I felt so inspired by this study. So what Stephanie did was she took the breed blend and color study and she made it her warp, and that was the BFL, Wensleydale, and and mohair. And then she, in her weft, she used a 20/2 silk. And so that's how in her entire, if I pause this here for just a sec, it might just take me a sec. You can really see in the weaving, you can see that point twill. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. It was threaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's a point twill. And then she wove it, she might have woven it straight draw, but I think she wove it, I think she wove it straight draw, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyways, you can see that you've got areas there where she's got some contrast. The biggest thing to think about when you're combining fiber types is how they shrink differently and how it will affect sort of the overall texture. So if you take a 100% merino, let's say, and you've washed and finished it ahead of time, this goes back to our conversation earlier in the show with washing and finishing yarns. If it wasn't washed and finished and you took a 100% merino yarn in your warp and you stuck something long and drapey that's not really going to change in the washing process, you're going to end up, so let's say you do like a really long stapled Romney in your weft. So you've got this really, really bouncy merino in your warp, and then you've got this, really drapey Romney in your weft. You're going to end up with your Romney is going to compress and scrunch down. It's going to poof. It's going to, the crimp is going to reactivate. The whole thing's going to go boing. You're going to end up with texture in your finished fabric, right? And if you finish both of those yarns ahead of time, and even maybe do a little bit of a sample ahead of time, a four shaft pin loom is, a pin loom is a great way for figuring out some of this stuff ahead of time. You can see, as long as you've washed and finished those yarns ahead of time, you sort of have an idea of how they're going to act. Then when you put them on the loom, there's not as many surprises. But if you don't finish them ahead of time, yeah, you're going to probably have a lot of surprises. Here, Stephanie put silk with it, but we know from a really, really drapey yarn, the BFL Wensleydale silk, mohair, combined with the silk, it's just drape galore, right? And then soften it up with the silk as well. It's sort of a really great thing. I don't think Mary's example is blended. So she's got a merino braid and she's got the Breed Blending Color Study yarns. So, sampling here becomes your friend. A pin loom is a great opportunity, but you don't need to have a pin loom. You can have, like a little tapestry loom will do the trick for sampling, where you do one warp and one weft and see how they wash and finish. You can use a piece of cardboard as well, where you cut slits in the top, on the sides, and at the bottom, and you can cut to your set that you want. So if you want your set to be, say, 10 ends per inch, you cut 10 little cuts per inch on your little piece of cardboard and you weave, right? And then you can hem stitch around it to secure it when you take it off of the cardboard. And the nice thing about that is exactly, you've got like a real little sample in front of you to be able to compare. You can also create if you're not sure about the colors, you can take a piece of cardstock, sort of long and narrow, and you can wrap yarns around it and combine them. So you can maybe do like one wrap of your Breed Blending Color Study, one wrap of the merino, one wrap of the Breed Blending Color Study, and so on. And what's neat about that is you can see how the colors are going to work up and whether or not you like the overall coherence of the colors. And that's a really great way, because sometimes we think that the colors are going to work and then we get them on the loom and we're like, oh, that doesn't work at all. And it's hard to unweave. And then comes back to, we keep coming back to this again and again today. I personally really prefer, it when we wash and finish our yarns ahead of time. So these are some of the samples that I've done recently that we've talked about on the podcast. All of these yarns were washed and finished ahead of time. And the reason for that is, for me personally, and like I mentioned earlier in the show, Diana Twist and I have had lots of conversations over the years about this exact phenomenon. You don't have any surprises, or not as many surprises, in the finished fabric if you wash and finish your yarns ahead of time. If you know the merino is going to bloom like crazy, like that sample over there, the really bright white one on the far side there, if you know that merino is going to bloom like crazy, but you've already washed and finished your yarn and it's kind of done its thing and it's bloomed, now you sort of know, okay, that's what the yarn's going to be like and that's how it's going to act. If you know that and you know it's going to bloom and it's going to do its thing and it's going to be the warp and the weft, maybe it's not such a big deal to weave with it unfinished. The other thing that I really like too is, if you wash and finish your yarns, you can take into account shrinkage, so you know how much you're going to lose yardage wise. The other thing is, most of us are dealing with 100% wool. We're not, it's funny, I don't think a lot of us are working with a lot of superwash anymore. That seemed to sort of be like 10 years ago when I first started podcasting, that a lot of us were working with superwash still. But many of us are working with 100% untreated yarns now. In our spinning, when you wash and finish, those fibers are going to sort of, in the hot water, those scales are going to open up and they're going to lock in with their neighbor in that section of yarn, right? And it just increases the integrity of the yarn to be able to withstand warp, to be able to withstand the wear and tear that comes with using a beater, especially, if you have a rigid heddle and you're using a plastic, heddle, that can sometimes be really hard on yarn. It can rough it up quite a lot. I have found that the metal beaters are a little bit smoother and they don't rough up the yarns quite as much, but my double weave log cabin blanket, it was really roughing up the yarns and creating lots of pilling on the surface of the yarn. It was really beating it up. It was a singles yarn. It's a very soft spun yarn. There's other issues. So I hope that helps, and I hope it gets you started, Mary, but I would really encourage you to start off with some sampling and just see what you think and see what you like, and then go from there. And we're always here to answer more questions if you have other questions. So Esther, I hope that gets you started with your question about whether or not to wash and finish yarns before weaving with them. We talked a little bit about sizing today, and we also talked about mixing fiber types. The other thing I wanted to mention really quickly, for those of you who are sort of starting to be more intermediate to advanced weavers and you're starting to want to learn some other techniques, you can also look into adding a second back beam on your loom. My Louette Spring has 2 back beams, and it means that you can take one warp and wind it on, and then you can add a second warp over top and have a second warp that needs to be tensioned differently, and have them both overlaying each other, and then you go through your threading and threading your heddles and slaying your reed afterward. So if you have like a 100% alpaca warp that needs to be woven with a 100% silk warp, for tensioning issues on the loom itself, you can have one warp going onto one back beam and then the other warp going onto the other back beam. And that way you can fix a lot of your tension issues on the loom, so that when you get your fabric off the loom, you don't have a whole bunch of tension issues and a lot of stuff to fix. That's something to think about for those of you who have looms that you can add a second back beam and you're getting to that point where you want to delve into more advanced weaving. So that is something to think about. So let's say, you know, Mary, you're gonna get super, super over the top. That would be something that somebody could think about if they're looking at, you know, something really super advanced. Dion had a really great question about weaving singles, and I want to do that discussion justice, so we'll save that for next time. And the show has gone on for long enough, so I'm going to say goodbye. I hope you guys have a wonderful few weeks. Rebecca will be back here next week with the wool circle, and then we will be off for a week before we come back at the beginning of October. I feel like it's October 7th. For the next live stream episode 323. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go get some lunch. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day, and happy spinning, happy knitting, and happy weaving. Bye everyone.